I wasn't supposed to see the group chat. My name lit up in bold, followed by the words, "Not wife material." They thought I was just a polished prop, something to smile for the family photos and fade into the background. But silence is my sharpest weapon, and numbers are my language. While they mocked my place at their table, I was setting another one they would never control. The night my mother-in-law raised a glass in my restaurant, she didn't know she was toasting my survival. Some scars don't break you. They season you for fire. They called me the perfect daughter-in-law. My face was tagged on their family Instagram page, framed by crystal glasses and candlelight. My smile polished into something fit for a luxury magazine. The captions were always sweet, dripping with praise. "We are blessed to have such a graceful woman in the family. She completes us." Hundreds of likes poured in, strangers congratulating me for having landed in such a golden household. What no one could see was how those words curdled into silence the moment the phones went down and the dishes were cleared. Behind the scenes, admiration turned into appraisals, and every gesture I made was graded like a performance review I never asked to take. At the table, Gloria, my mother-in-law, leaned across the polished oak and asked if I'd considered more appropriate hobbies for a woman in my position. Her eyes were bright with false warmth, but her tone was a blade disguised as sugar. My husband, Ethan, chuckled politely, nudging me to laugh along. I did because silence was safer than honesty. They never knew how much power there was in my stillness. When I excused myself to the restroom, I scrolled through my notifications out of habit. That's when I saw it, my name flashing from a group thread I didn't recognize. It was labeled Family Core. I tapped it, confused, only to find a series of messages that peeled away the glossy surface of my life like wallpaper crumbling off damp walls. "She photographs well, but she's not wife material. She's an accessory. Brand placement. Nothing more." My stomach tightened as if someone had slipped ice into my veins. The same hands that held mine in public, the same mouths that toasted to my presence, now reduced me to a decorative piece in their carefully curated empire. I wanted to close the chat, to pretend I hadn't seen it, but my eyes dragged across the scroll of texts. Gloria had written most of them. She detailed how I boosted the family's image, how I was useful for gala nights, but warned her children not to let me near the real business. One sister-in-law chimed in with laughing emojis, mocking my little side projects. Ethan's words were there too, quieter, yet soaked with betrayal. "She means well, but she doesn't understand our world. Don't worry, I'll handle her." I set the phone down on the marble counter and stared at my reflection. My lipstick was perfect, my hair unshaken, but the woman in the mirror felt like a mannequin trapped in glass. The next day, their praise continued, as though nothing had been said in that digital shadowland. Gloria posted a carousel of me arranging flowers for a charity event, her caption claiming I had a natural gift for making things beautiful. The comments showered me with compliments, but the truth hit me harder than any insult. My existence had been edited, packaged, and distributed like a marketing campaign. Their empire wasn't just financial, it was digital, woven into public perception. And I wasn't a member of the family, I was a product. I tried to ignore it, to focus on my work. My small consulting firm, once my pride, had been absorbed into Ethan's portfolio after our wedding. When clients reached out, they were now rerouted to his office. My strategies, my hard-earned victories, were suddenly under his signature. Even my name was fading from contracts I had fought to secure. At family dinners, they praised Ethan for his brilliance, citing growth projections that I had personally drafted. When I glanced at him, hoping for acknowledgement, he only squeezed my hand under the table, a gesture meant to reassure, but it felt like a silencing grip. My wins were his legacy now, not mine. Weeks passed with the same duality, the glittering facade online, the quiet dismissal offline. Then, one morning, I woke to a flood of notifications. My personal Instagram had been taken over. The profile picture remained mine, but the content was unrecognizable. It was filled with promotional posts for the Whitmore Corporation, glossy ads wrapped in fake intimacy. My voice was gone, replaced by corporate slogans that painted me as the smiling spokesperson of their empire. Proud to stand behind the family business. One post read under a photo of me at a gala, an image I hadn't uploaded. I scrolled faster, breath tightening, until I saw the bio had been changed. Wife, supporter, blessed to be a Whitmore. It wasn't just theft, it was erasure. My identity had been rewritten, my individuality consumed by the machine of their control. Gloria called me that afternoon, her tone sweet as syrup, thanking me for volunteering my platform to help the family's image. Ethan, standing beside her, kissed my forehead and whispered, "It's better this way. Trust me." But trust had evaporated. My silence was no longer compliance. It was calculation. Behind my calm expression, I was already imagining the ledger lines, the assets hidden in shadows, the power they thought I would never touch. They didn't know I had seen behind the curtain. They didn't know their perfect illusion had cracked. I learned quickly that surrender was the best disguise. Around the dinner table, I smiled, nodded, and folded into silence. I let Gloria believe her words had buried me. When Ethan dismissed my opinions, I lowered my eyes as though my will had been drained. They mistook quiet for defeat, but weakness, when played carefully, can be a costume sharper than any blade. I knew they needed to think I had given up so they would lower their guard. In the privacy of my study, the game was different. I began to build a file, my hidden arsenal. Every screenshot, every contract amendment, every transfer that slipped through accounts, I captured and cataloged. I stored them in encrypted drives labeled as harmless folders, recipes, old travel photos, even a folder called Wedding Edits. What appeared to be nostalgia was a war chest. I studied transaction records until my eyes burned, connecting dots between names, shell companies, and obscure digital wallets. There was always a trail. Money, no matter how cleverly disguised, leaves fingerprints. One night, while digging through the metadata of an email, I found something unusual. A string of transactions routed through a crypto exchange I recognized from a previous client. Gloria's name was nowhere, but the pattern was too familiar. A family trust account siphoned steadily into anonymous wallets. The amounts weren't enormous at first, tens of thousands, but they grew, stacking into 7 figures. My heart pounded as I traced the flow further. Offshore wallets, coin mixers. Gloria, the woman who condemned me for not understanding their world, was laundering family assets in a way that could ruin her if exposed. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with the jolt of discovery. She had her weapons. Now I had mine. I didn't rush. Exposure too early would mean retaliation I wasn't prepared to withstand. Instead, I deepened my preparations. I rebuilt my contacts quietly, reaching out to people who had once believed in my work. I called an old client, a startup founder whose company I had helped restructure years ago. He remembered me, not as Ethan's wife, but as the strategist who had saved his failing brand. He owed me. Another message went out to a community forum of small restaurateurs and digital entrepreneurs, many of whom shared stories of being silenced by larger corporations. They recognized my voice. My circle of allies began to form, invisible to the Whitmore's polished lens. The most unexpected ally came from within the family itself. Daniel, Ethan's younger cousin, a junior lawyer, always dismissed as a failure compared to his siblings. At gatherings, he was the quiet one, overshadowed by louder voices. But when I approached him with carefully chosen words, I saw something flicker in his expression: recognition. He knew what it meant to be underestimated, to be overlooked. Over coffee in a quiet downtown cafe, he admitted he had grown tired of watching Gloria manipulate everyone. He agreed to help, not for revenge, but because justice mattered to him. For the first time, I felt the ground steady beneath me. The second ally came from a different world. Mia Torres, a rising food influencer I had met briefly during a charity gala. She had a growing platform and an instinct for authenticity that audiences trusted. I reached out discreetly, explaining that I was building something new, something that would need a story rooted in truth. She listened carefully, then agreed to stand by me when the time came, not as a pawn, but as a partner who understood the weight of narrative in a digital age. Piece by piece, I uncovered the shape of my arsenal, my skills in finance, my knowledge of operations, my ability to trace numbers and weave them into strategy. All of it had been dismissed by the Whitmores, but outside their shadow, those tools shone like polished steel. With Daniel's legal insight and Mia's influence, I no longer felt alone. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was preparing. The decision came late one evening as I stared at the family's Instagram page, filled with glossy portraits of perfection. I realized I didn't need their brand. I needed my own. But it couldn't bear my name. Not yet. I chose a pseudonym, crafted a new identity that no one could trace back to me. Under that name, I registered a new company. It was lean, independent, built with the silent investors I had cultivated over months. A company free of their chains, invisible to their gaze. When the confirmation email arrived, I felt a surge of power I hadn't known in years. This wasn't just a business filing, it was my declaration of independence, written in legal ink. For the first time, I wasn't playing by their rules. I was building a game of my own, and they didn't even know I existed. The first blow came not from a courtroom or a family dinner, but from the trending page of social media. My name, once hidden in hashtags about charity events and curated lifestyle photos, now surged under a far darker headline, Gold Digger Exposed. The Whitmores had unleashed their arsenal, and they knew exactly where to strike. Viral clips appeared overnight. Me receiving a designer handbag, me stepping out of a chauffeured car, me holding Ethan's hand at a gala. Each image was edited, reframed, stripped of context, and weaponized to paint me as a woman who had married into money for personal gain. The comments cut sharper than any private insult. Strangers dissected my clothes, my smile, even the cadence of my laugh. She's rehearsed. She's bought. Classic social climber. My inbox filled with venom disguised as opinion. Gloria's strategy was simple and devastating. Turn public perception into a cage. Make me so toxic that no investor, no ally would dare stand beside me. They rewrote the timeline of my life with precision. Every contribution I had ever made to Ethan's ventures was erased, or worse, reframed as dependency. When I had transferred seed money from my savings into his first expansion, they labeled it a gift from him to me. When I had landed a contract with a supplier, they twisted it into Ethan's generosity for letting me participate. Years of work swallowed whole by their narrative. In the glossy videos they released, Ethan became the architect, and I was reduced to his decorative shadow. I confronted him one night, my voice shaking, not with fear, but with fury. You know the truth, Ethan. You know I built those models. I made those calls. He looked at me with tired eyes, the kind that pretended to ache with sympathy but dripped with compliance. Claire, it's better if you don't fight this. Mom knows how to handle the press. Let her protect the family's image. Protect. That word broke me. Protecting the family meant sacrificing me. The second blow landed harder. I received an official notice in the mail, my name stripped from the company I had built before our marriage. Ethan had signed the papers, legal maneuvering buried in prenuptial clauses I hadn't even known existed. I wasn't just erased from their story, I was erased from my own. To make the knife twist deeper, they released a video online, a carefully cut reel of me at a charity gala. My laughter slowed, captions implying drunkenness, irresponsibility. Paired with fabricated receipts of overspending, it painted me as incompetent, reckless. It wasn't just slander, it was character assassination. For days, I refused to leave my apartment. Calls from allies went unanswered. Even Daniel, who had sworn to help me, warned me over encrypted messages. They're escalating. Don't make a move until you're sure. I tried to stay calm, but inside my resolve began to fracture. Every step forward I had taken was being ripped apart by a family empire that thrived on control. I wasn't just outnumbered, I was outmaneuvered. Still, I refused to let them dictate the ending. I activated my new company's channels, pushing quiet messages into communities that still trusted me. I thought if I could show proof of my work, evidence of my strategies, I might claw back a sliver of credibility. For a moment, it worked. Supporters began to trickle in, whispers of doubt against the Whitmore narrative. Hope flickered like a fragile flame. Then the third blow came. My new account, my fresh start, was doxed. My hidden identity, carefully constructed, was exposed in a single post that spread like wildfire. Screenshots revealed the pseudonym I had used, linked directly back to me. They called me deceptive, manipulative, a fraud hiding behind false names to exploit sympathy. Worse, the exposure wasn't random. It was orchestrated by more than just Gloria. Behind the curtain, I recognized the hand of a media conglomerate aligned with the Whitmores, amplifying the attack with resources I couldn't match. I wasn't just fighting a family, I was fighting an industry. By midnight, the digital firestorm consumed everything I had built. Investors pulled out, partners severed ties. Even Mia, the influencer who had promised to stand beside me, went silent, her posts suddenly scrubbed of my name. In the span of a week, I had gone from strategist to pariah, from builder to villain. My arsenal lay in pieces, my allies scattered. I sat alone in my apartment, the curtains drawn, my phone face down on the table, vibrating endlessly with new alerts I couldn't bear to read. The city outside continued to move, uncaring, its lights flickering against my window, like a cruel reminder that life went on. I had thought I could outplay them. I had thought silence and calculation would be enough, but I had underestimated the depth of their reach. For the first time, I wondered if they had won. And in that silence, I tasted rock bottom. Rock bottom was cold, but it taught me something vital. There was no lower to fall. Once the fear of losing everything had materialized, a strange clarity settled in. If they could destroy me through the very screens the world worshipped, then perhaps those screens could also become my salvation. The Whitmores believed they owned the narrative. They forgot narratives thrive on hunger, and hunger can be fed with truth, dropped in careful doses like water to a parched throat. I began with silence. After weeks of humiliation, I posted a single sentence on my dormant account. Truth takes time to cook. The cryptic tone caught attention. People screenshot it, argued about it, speculated what I meant. By morning, hashtags bloomed. My follower count, once decimated, began to climb again. I released the first proof, a redacted contract, signed in Ethan's hand where my consulting company had been absorbed without my knowledge. No commentary, just the document. The internet did the rest. Threads unraveled, debates erupted, strangers demanded more. Then came the second drop. Wire transfers from Gloria's trust funneled through crypto wallets. Again, no accusations, just the evidence, time-stamped and undeniable. Influencer pages picked it up, podcasts dissected it, amateur sleuths connected dots faster than any lawyer could silence. By keeping my voice minimal, I made space for others to shout. The same mob that had crucified me now demanded explanations from the Whitmores. The tide was shifting, and I was learning to surf it. Mia returned, her silence broken. She reached out with an apology, explaining she had gone quiet to avoid being targeted herself. This time, she offered more than words. She offered her platform. Together, we planned a series, live streams where evidence would be revealed piece by piece, where I would speak sparingly while the documents spoke for me. Each reveal ended on a cliffhanger, leaving audiences clamoring for the next installment. We turned scandal into serialized storytelling. and the world couldn't look away. The breakthrough moment came during a Friday night broadcast. We unveiled an email chain showing Gloria instructing Ethan to reframe my financial contributions as household gifts. The phrasing was cold, calculated, erasing my labor with a single stroke. The chat exploded, trending across platforms. Hours later, mainstream outlets picked it up, and by Saturday morning, Gloria Whitmore's name wasn't trending for charity galas anymore. It was trending under financial manipulation. The queen of image control had become the villain of a national scandal, but victory was not clean. As the dominoes fell, chaos spread. Whitmore Corporation's shareholders demanded explanations. Stocks dipped, contracts froze, allies distanced themselves. In boardrooms I had never been invited to enter, my name echoed as the source of their unraveling. Ethan called me, his voice trembling between rage and desperation. "You're destroying us," he said. For a moment, I wanted to remind him that they had destroyed me first, but I simply hung up. He wasn't calling to reconcile. He was calling because his empire was bleeding, and for once he couldn't stop it. Amid the crumbling walls, I noticed something strange. A file I hadn't released appeared on a smaller gossip site, a screenshot of my pseudonym tied to the new company I had registered in secret. It was too precise to be a random leak. Someone close had betrayed me. Panic coursed through me until the realization settled. One of my allies was a mole. Daniel, the cousin who had pledged loyalty, suddenly avoided my calls. His legal advice turned vague, his tone colder. It was clear. He had switched sides, or perhaps he had never left them at all. The betrayal stung sharper than Gloria's contempt. Allies were meant to steady you when enemies closed in. Now I had to wonder whether every move I made was being mirrored back to the Whitmores. Yet even in that realization, I understood something else. The truth I had already released was too strong to cage. The public had tasted blood, and they would not spit it out. The machine Gloria had built was devouring itself, no matter how many moles she planted. Weeks passed in a storm of revelations. The Whitmores lost contracts, their once polished name dragged through hearings and headlines. Gloria withdrew from public view, her perfect facade cracked beyond repair. Ethan appeared on television, voice breaking, attempting to defend misunderstandings. The performance fell flat. America had found a new villain family, and no spin could reverse it. And yet, in the silence of my apartment, I didn't feel triumphant. I stared at the divorce papers on my table, unsigned, my ring lying beside them like a weight I no longer wanted to carry. I had won the battle for truth, but in the process, I had burned the very bridge I had once crossed in love. The man who had promised partnership had become collateral, and my marriage was rubble. The public called me resilient, a phoenix rising from ashes. They didn't see that the ashes were pieces of a family I had once hoped to build. I folded the papers, slid them into an envelope, and whispered to myself, "Some fires don't just cleanse, they scar." Fame arrived like a storm I hadn't prepared for. Overnight, I was no longer the woman whispered about in gossip threads. I was the headline, the interview subject, the keynote speaker. Claire Whitmore, the Phoenix of Finance, one magazine declared, my face spread across its cover. Brands approached me, not as a liability, but as a symbol of resilience. Invitations flooded in, panels on women in leadership, guest appearances on talk shows, partnerships with startups eager to borrow my credibility. Everywhere I went, strangers called me an inspiration. I should have felt vindicated, but with each accolade came an unease I couldn't shake. Success was intoxicating, and like all intoxicants, it clouded judgment. I began to notice myself treating my employees with the same detached precision the Whitmores had once wielded against me. Meetings ran late into the night, tasks doubled without warning, and mistakes, once forgivable, were met with cold reprimands. My assistant, a young woman named Harper, once told me she joined because I was living proof that integrity could survive betrayal. But one evening, as I barked at her for a minor oversight, I saw in her eyes the same fear I had once felt under Gloria's gaze. It was like staring into a mirror I had sworn I'd never own. Investors praised my efficiency, but whispers in the office grew louder. People began to murmur that I was no different from those I had fought. The irony was bitter. I had clawed my way out of their empire only to build a shadow of it in my own image. I told myself it was necessary, that power demanded sacrifice, that leadership wasn't about kindness, but survival. Yet deep down, I knew I was becoming what I despised. The fracture appeared when Harper handed me her resignation. She didn't slam the letter on my desk or curse my name. She simply placed it before me, her hands steady, her eyes firm. "I believed in you," she said softly. "But this isn't what you promised. You said we would build something different. Instead, it feels like I'm working for Gloria, just with a different last name on the door." Her words carved into me deeper than any public scandal. Before leaving, she added one final cut. "People will see the truth about you just like they saw the truth about them." Her departure rippled outward. Whispers turned into rumors, and soon an online post surfaced. An anonymous testimony from a former employee describing my office as toxic, exploitative, another empire of control. The irony didn't escape me. Once again, I was the subject of a narrative, only this time I had handed them the material myself. As I struggled to contain the fallout, another revelation struck harder. I discovered that Mia, the influencer who had stood beside me during my resurrection, had been documenting everything. Not as a partner, but as a case study. Articles appeared under her byline, "The Rise of the Phoenix, How Betrayal Breeds Power." She spoke on podcasts about my journey, not with the intimacy of an ally, but with the detachment of a researcher exploiting her subject. She dissected my strategy, my evidence drops, even my moments of vulnerability, framing them as deliberate plays in a larger narrative. The betrayal cut deeper than Gloria's manipulation ever had. Family treachery was almost expected, but friendship, trust, built in the rubble of my life, was sacred, and Mia had turned it into currency. I realized then that she had never been on my side. She had been feeding from my story, building her empire atop my ashes. Her silence when I was doxxed, her sudden reappearance once the tide turned, it hadn't been hesitation, it had been strategy. Confronting her was futile. She thrived on exposure, and any outburst would only fuel her content. Instead, I watched as she painted herself as the mastermind behind my survival, the puppeteer who had guided me through the storm. People began to believe it. After all, she had the platform, the audience, the curated image of a guide leading a fallen woman back to light. My triumph became her narrative, my scars her profit. One evening, alone in my office, I scrolled through her latest post. It featured a photo of me at our first live stream, smiling nervously at the camera. The caption read, "Some flames burn because we fan them." The comments praised her foresight, her wisdom, her mentorship. They spoke of me as though I were her creation, not my own. That was the moment the final truth struck. Betrayal doesn't always come with blood ties or signed contracts. Sometimes it wears the mask of friendship, a smile wide enough to hide the knife it holds. Gloria had tried to erase me. Ethan had signed me away. But Mia, she had consumed me piece by piece until I was little more than a story she told for profit. I had fought so hard to escape the Whitmore's shadow, only to find myself trapped in another. And this time, the prison wasn't built of family loyalty. It was built of trust misplaced, of faith twisted into exploitation. The ultimate betrayal wasn't that they had underestimated me. It was that I had overestimated her. The weight of betrayal pressed on me like a stone at the bottom of a river. Mia's duplicity, Ethan's compliance, Gloria's cruelty, together they had stripped me bare. Yet in that stillness, something shifted. I realized I had been playing their game all along, chasing headlines, chasing validation, chasing a throne built on sand. Power had poisoned me, twisting my vision until I was unrecognizable even to myself. If I wanted freedom, I had to break the game, not win it. The decision came quietly, one sleepless night as I studied the financial reports of Whitmore Corporation. Their empire was hemorrhaging under lawsuits, scandals, and plummeting stock prices. Creditors circled like vultures. The family that had mocked me was one step from collapse. I could have let them fall, could have savored the sight of them devoured. Instead, I saw a chance to end the cycle. I sold off a portion of my own company, shares that represented years of sweat, and used the proceeds to buy their debt at auction. Overnight, I became their creditor, not their victim. For the first time, they owed me. I didn't gloat when I walked into the boardroom. Gloria sat across the table, her once immaculate posture sagging, her eyes dulled with fatigue. Ethan avoided my gaze, his hands clasped tight as if he could still hold together what was already broken. I laid the papers before them and said only this: "You're free. The debt is gone." They stared at me, stunned, waiting for the trap. But there was none. I wasn't interested in chaining them. I was interested in releasing myself. Afterward, I returned to my apartment, the divorce papers still waiting like an unanswered question. This time, my pen didn't hesitate. With each stroke of ink, I felt the weight lift. My name, written in bold letters, no longer tethered to Ethan's. My freedom was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, like the closing of a heavy door after years of draft. That night, I placed the signed envelope on the counter, slid off my wedding ring, and whispered to the empty room, "I'm done." But endings can be beginnings in disguise. Months later, I opened the doors of Phoenix Table, a restaurant built not on spectacle but on resilience. Its walls were adorned with subtle cracks in the plaster, polished and framed as art. Imperfections celebrated, not hidden. The slogan stretched across the menu read, "Some scars feed the flame." Every dish told a story of endurance, from the slow-braised short rib to the charred vegetables kissed by fire until they were sweeter for the burn. Phoenix Table wasn't just a restaurant, it was a promise. Part of the profits fed into a fund for women entrepreneurs in digital and food industries, women who had been silenced or dismissed the way I once had. They came to me with ideas, and I gave them more than money. I gave them the belief that their scars, too, could ignite something lasting. Watching them grow was a mirror I could finally bear to look into. On opening night, the tables were filled with laughter and clinking glasses. Investors, artists, activists, people who believed in second chances. Toward the end of the evening, I noticed a familiar figure at the corner table. Gloria. She sat stiffly, her pearls intact but her aura dimmed. She ordered quietly, scanning the menu without acknowledging my presence. When the bill arrived, she hesitated for only a moment before pulling out her credit card. There was poetry in it. The woman who once mocked me as unworthy, who once told me I added nothing of value, now paid for the privilege of tasting what I had built with my own hands. I didn't approach her. I didn't need to. Some victories are loud, others hum in silence, sweeter because they require no audience. As I walked through the dining room, the air rich with the scent of oak smoke and seared meat, I felt the hum of life around me. I wasn't the gold digger they had painted, nor the puppet Mia had performed. I was a woman who had burned, who had scarred, and who had risen not in spite of the fire, but because of it. The world outside would keep spinning. Media cycles would churn. Betrayals would continue. Power would tempt. But inside Phoenix Table, beneath the glow of brass lights, I had carved out something untouchable. My legacy wasn't revenge. It was survival refined into creation, pain distilled into strength. And somewhere in the corner, as Gloria lifted her fork, I realized that the illusion was finally gone. What remained was real.